Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm so glad you could join us for what I know is going to be a practical and thought-provoking conversation. My name is Sia Papageorgiou, and I'm the co-founder of the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence. We're a global professional development and insights organisation, and we help communication professionals, leaders and organisations learn, grow and thrive through world-class training, research-driven insights and a vibrant global community. Now, if you've ever felt overwhelmed by measurement, and let's face it, most communication professionals have, or frustrated by dashboards that don't seem to tell the real story, you are absolutely in the right place today. The truth is, effective communication isn't just about creativity or clever messaging. It's about alignment, it's about trust and influence and measurable impact. But too often, measurement gets reduced to numbers that look good in a report without revealing what's really working, where trust is building or breaking, and how communication is driving business outcomes. That's exactly why I'm so pleased to be joined by someone who knows this space inside out, Gabrielle Loring, or as we lovingly call her, Gabi. And Gabi is a fellow of the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence. Now, Gabi is an award-winning communication consultant with a reputation for blending creativity and strategy with measurable impact. With more than 20 years leading communication, change and employee experience initiatives, and 13 IABC Gold Quill Awards under her belt, and we have a bit of a fun competition going there, who has the most gold quills. She's someone who truly understands how to measure what matters. So today we're going to explore how to rethink measurement as a leadership tool, not a final checkbox, and how meaningful metrics can help you build influence, strengthen trust, and connect communication to real business value. Gabi, I'm so glad you're here. I know this conversation is going to be packed with insights that people can take straight back to their organizations.
Thanks, Sia. I'm so happy to be here and am looking forward to our conversation.
Now, to everybody who has dialed in, please feel free to use the chat function to ask your questions. There's going to be plenty of time to get to them. We also have a number of questions that have been pre-submitted by those who registered for today's webinar, so we'll make sure there's time to get to those as well. So Gabi, you and I talk a lot about moving away from measurement as an afterthought and instead using it to shape strategy from the start. What does that shift actually look like in practice? And why do you think so many professionals still find it hard to embed measurement early?
Well, before we go into that, let's just talk about what is it we're measuring. I love this quote from Adrian Copley, who is your co-founder for the for Strategic Communication Excellence. He said this during an IABC Circle of Fellows podcast, and he said, "Don't measure everything because there's a lot you can measure." And also, at the recent IABC uh, World Conference, next slide, please.
Yep.
Um,
Hang on a sec.
Neil Hoyne, who is the chief strategist at Google, said to avoid using the wrong data to reach a conclusion. So you have to be careful about what it is you're measuring and what that really means. And to stop drowning in data you may never use. So, like Adrian said, you don't want to just measure everything. So I thought that was a really good way to sort of start our conversation about what it is you should be measuring. So here's a typical measurement. You want to have a 25% increase in website visits since you had a redesign. That's a good metric, and it's a what we call an output-based objective. It's measurable and it's timed and it's a good measure. But why does this matter? How does this affect your business or department goals? So what you want to do is really think about why is it that you did the redesign to begin with? What are you trying to accomplish? And make sure that that's what you're measuring. And that's what we'll kind of walk through as we get into this here.
So then, Gabi, what's your advice for communication professionals who want to reframe conversations with their leaders to shift the focus from activity to impact?
So if you look at the next slide, what we want to do is start with identifying the business need or the opportunity. You want to determine the what and the why. What you're trying to accomplish and why meeting this goal is important. You want to think about all of these things. Why does your organization care about this initiative now? What specific challenges or changes are driving the need? How will the solution support your business goals, your department goals? What are the risks of not accomplishing your goals? What's the pushback that you expect to get? What does the research substantiate for your business need? And how does the need support the company's vision, mission, and EVP? So that's where you kind of want to start at the basics. Let's start at a strategic level and really understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then you can start getting into the metrics.
Sorry, I'm not a very good helper today, am I?
So Gallagher does their annual State of the Sector survey every year. And the Employee Communications Report for 2025 came out just about a month ago or so. And communicators said their number one purpose of communication is strategic alignment. And their number one priority is engaging teams on their purpose, strategy, and values. This falls right into what we just talked about. These are the things that communicators have said are important. So these are the things that you want to be measuring. So if you go to the next slide, also based on that report that Gallagher does every year, the top 5 reasons communicators said they use data and metrics right now, the top 3 were tied at 81%. To demonstrate the value of your communications, to inform decisions on future tactics, to understand the effectiveness of the communications. And right behind there is evaluating performance of tactics for continuous improvement and evaluating your channel framework. So you can see if you're measuring the right thing and using data the right way, you can really get a lot of information from that.
And Gabi, I believe to everybody who has dialed in, if you haven't had a look at Gallagher's State of the Sector report, it's actually one of my favorite reports. It comes out annually, and we have a link at the end of this deck to share with you, and we'll also put that in the email we'll send with the recording. It's a brilliant report and has some amazing insights for communication professionals. But we talk about the theory of measurement, but I want to get practical now, Gabi. You talk about defining the what and defining the why, so setting goals worth measuring, which is obviously incredibly important. But what, in your view, are the key ingredients of a strong measurement plan?
So before we get into the measurement plan, let's start with some of the basics, okay? We want to set meaningful goals and measurable objectives. Let me say that again, meaningful goals and measurable objectives. What's the difference? A goal is the overarching. What is it you want to accomplish? And how is it tied to business goals? If I'm sounding like a broken record already, it's because it's just so important. The objectives are the clearly defined desired outcome on how you're going to get to that goal. What will success look like? How are you going to measure it? And we often talk about the SMART formula. And if you don't know what the SMART formula is, we'll walk you through it. It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time framed. And we're going to do one example here, and we have a couple more coming up to help you understand how that works. So the overarching goal, again, is to help employer medical costs by shifting some employees to a new medical option. For those of you not in the US, healthcare costs is a big part of the benefits dollar that employers here in the US have to pay because we don't have socialized medicine. So our companies are constantly looking on ways to help their costs of healthcare because it just keeps rising and rising. So the SMART objective on how we're going to accomplish that is to have at least 800 employees enroll in a new medical option during the annual enrollment period. How is that SMART? It's specific, 800 employees. It's measurable. It's achievable. it's relevant to what we're talking about, and it's time framed during the annual enrollment period. We seem to have lost the slide, Sia.
Yes, sorry about that. I had a slight technical glitch.
So that's what a SMART goal looks like. And we'll take you through some specific examples in just a minute.
Sorry, folks. Gotta love technical
Did
issues.
say it's 3 a.m. there in Greece, so she's running on fumes.
Come on. And there's nobody to help me either. Hang on.
I can see if I can try to take over.
No, we can. We're nearly there. Sorry.
Excellent.
All right, here we go. Sorry, folks.
Okay, so next slide. So I talked a little bit earlier about an output-based goal, but there's also outcome-based goals. And what's the difference? An output-based goal measures a volume or increase. Some, like usually it's against media vehicles or channels, social media, those kinds of things. Some examples of that would be 50% of employees will watch the new promo video during 2024. Website visits will increase by 1,000 in 2024 compared to the year before. So those are output based, and those are really important to measure and will help you get to what you want to accomplish. But you also want to think about outcome based goals. And a true, really strategic plan is going to have both kinds of goals. So, an outcome based is, I like to say, it's where you move the needle. It's where you get the audience to gain awareness or understanding, have a different perception. It's quantifiable change in attitude, opinions, and behavior. So, for instance, some examples here: employee understanding of the company values increases 70% year after year, or 2,000 employees will contribute to their account in 2024. Now you've gotten an employee to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and they understand the value of actually contributing to their accounts. So that's what an outcome based goal is.
So just hearing you talk about the differences between output-based objectives and outcome-based, it reminded me of an analogy that I'd seen on LinkedIn a while back from one of my connections who's based in the UK, and she used soup to demonstrate the difference. And I use this in my training as well. And when we think about outputs, we think about the direct result of our work. We send an email, we share a piece of content. And then we look at what the channel is telling us. And sometimes they're called vanity metrics, but, going back to that analogy, she used soup and she said you boil vegetables, you get soup. So the vegetables boiling gives you soup. The fact that you're no longer hungry, though, is the outcome, which is the final result you're aiming to achieve. And I thought that was a really great way to demonstrate the difference between outputs and outcomes.
I like that.
Yeah, I love it. So I say that regularly in my training. But now that we've talked a little bit about how to set up your measures, how would you bring those insights together into a measurement plan? Because it's one thing to determine what you're measuring, but then you actually have to figure out how you're going to measure it. So how does all of that work together?
So if you can, you don't want to be done with the project and then, oh, how am I going to be able to prove this, right? Afterwards. You want to create a measurement plan up front, which ties your metrics to your objectives, and it'll let you know what you need to measure to determine your success. So this is a old campaign that we did, where it was about healthcare consumerism. And we were collecting metrics from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, which was their carrier. So the first desired behavior was to have people select a primary doctor and get that annual checkup, right? We all know it costs less to get well if you find something early rather than later, right? So what we wanted to measure was both how many people have a primary doctor and how many people have gotten their preventive care visits. So we wanted to look at the metrics for 2028 campaign versus the 2027. So the campaign went out in January. So we wanted to measure against the January of the year before. But we also know if you try to call your doctor and get an appointment, um, chances of you getting in that same month are slim to none. So we also wanted to look at the year-end numbers of 2027 versus 2028 so that we know how many people actually got their checkup, because when they got their checkup isn't necessarily when the campaign went out. And again, we have another example here. We wanted people to only go to the ER for true emergencies. You can see here, not only did we want to measure how many people went to the ER for non-emergencies, which is what we're trying to avoid, but also how many calls that came in to the alternatives, the nurse lines, the urgent care center visits, and the registrations. And again, we measured for the month that the campaign went out as well as for the full year. So once you have all this data, how do you present it to your management or to your uh, committee or whoever it is that you're presenting your information to? So the next slide shows you what we shared with our client, and that was the positives of what we found, as well as the areas of improvement. So you can see the use of in-network providers remained high, the use of generic medication remained high. I was only showing you part of our metrics of our plan. We actually each month had a different campaign, and we were measuring a lot of different things. But you can see under areas of improvement that the number of preventive care visits actually seem to be declining. And if you look at the third bullet, flu shots were on the decline. So this told us that we need to keep harping those messages, maybe even think about a new way to put out those messages, and what we want to do for the next year. So we want to use measurement to evaluate the success toward achieving your goals and your objectives, to find areas of improvement, and to inform your future communication or strategy. So this is how you kind of tie it all together, Sia.
That's a brilliant example, Gabby. And I know that you have a couple of case studies to show us. Are these Gold Quill award-winning case studies that you're about to show us?
Exactly. Exactly. So our first case study is Little Fuse. And I actually alluded to it earlier with my example. And that is they put in a new medical option, the Advantage PPO plus HSA. And HSA is a health savings account. And a PPO is a preferred provider organization. It's the name of a plan that are popular here in the US. So they needed to help, again, that those healthcare costs. So they needed to share the responsibility with associates so that they can, kind of toe the line on that. So one of the overarching goals was to have associates pay attention, make an active medical election. Even if they didn't go to the same plan that they wanted people to go to, they at least wanted them to stop and think about it. So our goal was to have 65% of associates make an active medical plan election during annual enrollment. We chose that goal because it was based on what the vendor said that is typical for an enrollment, and it was also based on what they've seen in their past. But they actually got more than 90% of the people to make an active enrollment. So they were really pleased that people stopped and thought about it and made an election. So in order to reduce those medical costs, they needed to have people actually go into this new option. So they wanted at least 10% of associates to choose this new option. You might say that sounds low, but again, we were going based on what the vendor said is how many people typically choose this kind of plan in the first year of offering it. And of those that went into the new plan, we wanted at least 50% of those to actually contribute to their HSA to really make it worthwhile for themselves. So we got 41% of the associates to go into this new plan, and 80% of them actually put money in. Put their money where their mouth is. So that's the first case study. The second case study is Schneider Electric. And based on focus group research, chats, survey results, they knew that their employees were looking for better ways to have flexibility and better ways to balance their work life. So they put in 3 new programs designed to give employees what they were calling new ways of working. And I'm only talking about 2 here because for brevity of this session, I wanted to make sure that we gave you some examples, but we didn't need to give you everything. So we wanted people to take advantage of these offerings so that they would have more flexibility and be able to balance their work life. So our goals were to have 800 employees do the PTO purchase program and 50 employees do the voluntary part-time employment. Now you might say a big company like Schneider Electric in the US, you only wanted 50 employees. It wasn't much of a goal, but actually to get 50 employees to say, hey, I want to go from full-time employment to part-time employment and only get part-time pay is not really a big draw. So it's a niche benefit. But if we were able to get that many people, you'll see in a minute the savings that we were looking for. So you can see here we way outdid our number of employees that did the PTO purchase, and we had 58 that did the voluntary part-time. So in addition for employees to think we're being flexible, we're offering you these great programs, they also wanted to save money on what they were offering so that they can use that money to help pay for healthcare costs or other benefits. So they would have 1.95 million in savings if we had 800 employees take advantage of the one program and 50 to voluntary part-time. But because we had such great numbers, they actually achieved more than 3.4 million in savings for the company. Now, that's something you can give to your boss. They can give to their boss. They can even give to the board to say, look at what we're able to accomplish. Now, obviously, communications can only do so much. They have to have the programs that were, so the program design was part of it, but the fact that we were able to communicate and get people to move the needle, make these elections, you can say is a direct result of communications. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
That's amazing. That's very powerful. And that's what we mean when we talk about quantifying the value of communication is turning your results into a bottom line impact. And that's the sort of stuff that resonates with senior leaders. And what you were saying earlier, Gabi, around your objective to only, have 50 employees enroll in voluntary part-time employment during annual enrollment. That's the achievable and relevant part of the SMART framework, because you wouldn't know that was doable or not doable if you hadn't done your research, if you didn't understand your audience, if you didn't have a baseline to be working from. And that's goes hand in hand with being strategic about what it is you're doing and measuring. So these are 2 really fantastic examples. Now, before we get to some questions, and please, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Please feel free to ask questions of Gabi or myself. We haven't talked about how to measure in terms of the approach, the measurement approach, or the tools you use to measure. Now, in the pre-submitted questions, we got quite a few questions around tools, and there seems to be a bit of a misconception in our profession around needing fancy tools or bells and whistles to actually measure the impact of what it is you do. And as Gabi said, if you focus on outcomes, that becomes way easier. So maybe, Gabi, would you like to talk to us about some of the ways that we can measure those outcomes in our organizations?
Sure. So I have to admit that I am in the internal space most entirely. When you talk about tools, there certainly are tools that you can use to measure social media, to get Google Analytics and all kinds of other things that you can use to gather output-based analytics. So there's tools that you can use for that, and we're really not going to get into the specifics of that. What I want to talk a little bit about are some of the outcome-based sort of results that you might want to measure, and that is focus groups. surveys, stand-up meetings where you go, especially for line employees or manufacturing employees that aren't as wired. You can just go to the site and just ask people, stop them and say, can I ask you 3 questions or whatever? You can get a lot of insight out of those things. When you talk about surveys, you can talk about an all employee survey, but you can also do a site location survey or a specific survey for just a targeted group as well. So, or at the end of a session or something like that. You can also make use of your ERGs or SIGs, your special interest groups, and use them to test your materials. You can also set up a special focus group just to test your communications itself. And you make sure that you have them sign when they come in, that they're getting a preview of what's coming so that they keep whatever, A, the news that you're communicating silent until you're ready to communicate it. And B, based on that feedback, you might actually change what the message is so that they're actually like your guinea pigs, if you will. So there's different ways that you can do some testing and get information from people. And while it's not as good, there are focus groups you can do virtually as well as in person. And there are some tools out there to help you with virtual focus groups. I don't really know of any firsthand, but you can do your research. And if you don't want to just do Teams or Zoom or whatever, there's also some tools that help you facilitate that as well. So there's different tools that you can use to get to that outcome, if you will, and the output.
And I think the point is that we have to get a bit creative about how we gather this information. And, if you don't have a big budget, if you don't have resources at your disposal, there are a lot of creative ways to gather the information you need. And a lot of it also depends on the quality of your relationships. And if you have solid relationships in your organization, you have access to your audience, speaking to 10 people is measurement. Sitting in on a team meeting and listening to employees' sentiment is measurement. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to cost a lot, and it doesn't have to be time consuming. As long as you understand what it is you're measuring and you have access to your audience from an outcome perspective, you can measure in a number of ways. And as Gabi said, there are a number of tools you can use, like internal and external tools, to help you measure, and they're channel-based. But when it comes to outcomes, as long as you have access to your audience, the sky's the limit. So don't let that prevent you from accessing your audience and asking for their perspectives.
And you can use your other teams. For instance, one of the things that comes up in the State of the Sector survey is the intersection between HR and communications. And there's some statistics in there. And you can do like a train the trainer session with your HR folks and ask them to actually do the focus groups in their location. And you make it easy for them to upload the results, and you do all the evaluation of it and the results. They're just asking the questions for you at the location. Yeah. So that's another way. If you can't travel or you can't get to locations, make use of, like I say, other teams or other departments to help you get at what it is you're trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so now let's go to some questions. Now we have a couple of questions in the chat, but we've received quite a number of questions from those who registered for today's session. Now, the first question from a pre-submitted question, and you've talked about this already to some extent, but how do you convince senior leaders to care about measurement when they only ask for high-level stats or vanity metrics?
So I hate to say be sneaky, but what you want to do is think about all these things. Maybe don't even tell them necessarily, and just at the end of the thing say, well, I know this is what you were looking for. Let's say it's the vanity, the output based. Here's how many people went to our new website, blah, blah, blah. But I also took a look at this and this, and you, like I just proved, we saved $3.4 million by communicating about these new programs. Money talks. And
100%.
senior leaders love, you want to talk their language, right?
Yeah.
So even if they're not ready for it and not realizing the connection you can make, go ahead and make that connection. And then the next time they'll be like, oh, so what are we going to measure this time? Because now they know how valuable you are. So that's
Absolutely.
one way of doing it, is just go ahead and do it anyway. Obviously, you can't do an all employee survey without them knowing, but you can certainly go to a couple locations and just ask some questions and find out how people are feeling, blah, blah, blah. The other thing is to use things like state of the sector, the Edelman Trust Barometer, other uh, some of the resources that are on the IABC website or the CSCE website that show them the value of communications and communications measurement, and why it's important to know really what your employees are thinking, that you
Yeah.
can't just make assumptions about what they're thinking. You really do need to ask the questions. So you can use some of the industry research to back up your goals. And the last thing I want to bring up is um, a lot of these CEOs love competition. So not only what they're doing, but if you can prove what maybe the competition is doing and how they're making meaningful results, man, that speaks loud to them. Because nobody wants FOMO, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think your point too about framing your outcomes is incredibly important when speaking to senior leaders, because absolutely that's what they respond to. And no senior executive on the planet is going to say no to you when you are saving them $3.5 million. Let me tell you that. But I think too, it's important for us to say that we're not saying that outputs don't have a place in your measurement plan. You have to know that your channels are fit for purpose. Absolutely. But what's really going to make a difference is focusing on your audience, the human receivers of your communication. Have you changed their knowledge? Have you changed their perceptions? Have you changed their behavior? That's the sort of stuff that has a direct translation or correlation to money saved, efficiency gains, all of those sorts of things that senior leaders care about. Because as Gabby said, they care about the bottom line, they care about money. And we have to put ourselves in that frame of mind too. So even if you have a senior leader who says to you, oh, but tell me about how the emails landed. Yeah, I can tell you how the emails landed, but what I do need to also tell you, what has a greater impact and what I think you're going to really care about is this, because we saved $100,000,
Right.
$2 million, or
And,
whatever.
and as you said about the output based, for instance, if you put in a website, where people are going on the website and what questions they have can really help you inform what kind of communications you need to do. Here's something people keep asking about. So maybe we need to make sure that we're, pushing out an email and helping them understand what it is you're trying to accomplish about X or whatever. What's meaningful to your employees. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of value in that, but there's also value in the other. So that's why we talk about both, and a good plan will have both.
absolutely. Another question that came in at registration, super interested in longer term measurement example over 5 years, say for a 2025 to 30 plan.
That's great, and it's very valuable. I will say in today's society, things change so much that I think a long term plan is great, and go ahead and do that. But also every year, review what it is you're trying to measure and what it is you're trying to accomplish, and adjust as you go. So you might want to do some long time and some short term measures, because what you started out measuring could be gone by the time, you could have had an acquisition. You could have been divested. There's all kinds of a new CEO thrown in the mix. All that change and churn is going to change what you're measuring, right?
Absolutely. And it brings up a good point that Measurement is never a set and forget type of thing. And I don't assume that the person who asked this question assumed that they were going to do it once at the beginning and once at the end. But, we have to measure our progress along the way. And that's what keeps us strategic and focused on continuous improvement and making sure that we set ourselves realistic targets. We measure our progress along the way, and we keep our finger on the pulse, so to speak, with regards to how our audience is thinking, how they're feeling, and their behaviours that they're displaying. Another question that has come in: are there any standard or more common, say, top 3 or top 5 metrics to consider as a general guide?
I don't want to answer that because it's what is it you're trying to do? What's important to your organization? What's important to your department? That's so open-ended. It's about tying it all together. So if I work for a university or I work for IABC, my metrics are going to be quite different than if you work for a manufacturing company or you're working for a publicly traded company. So I don't think there's anything you can say. We tried to give you some concrete examples and some different things you can do to measure, but the metrics themselves has to be what it is you're trying to do.
Absolutely. And they have to be aligned to what's happening in the organization and the strategic foundations of the organization. Having said that, though, working in, say, a discipline like internal communication, you sometimes start to see the same sorts of themes come out. Of course, it has to be relevant to the organization, but things like when I'm looking at research for organizations, one of my baseline measures is always to measure the clarity, consistency, timeliness, and relevance of internal communication, because I think that gives a baseline view of how the organization is doing when it comes to internal communication. Some of the other...
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You can do a communications audit as well.
Absolutely. And an audit is a great way to measure the effectiveness of your internal and external communication. Some of the other things that I've seen in my line of work are measuring the communication effectiveness of frontline managers, measuring the communication effectiveness of senior leaders. And one of the probably key things to do is measure the alignment of internally between your employees and the organization's strategic foundations and strategy. So that's like a key sort of starting point. But again, it has to be relevant to what's going on in your organization at the time, what its key priorities are, and basically what your senior leaders care about. That's what you should be aligning your measures with. Find out what's important to them and get to work making sure that your communication is helping solve those problems.
Another thing, as I mentioned before, use your HR staff. See if you can get them not everybody's going to show, but see if you can get the location HR managers on a call, because they have kind of the pulse of their individual organizations, and ask them some questions and ask them what they think. Also, plant managers is another great thing. They have those stand-up calls a lot of times, meetings really quick before a shift starts. So they're another good resource on getting the pulse of what's going on in the organization if you don't have the time or resources or money to do a really big survey or something.
Absolutely. Another question that has come in is about using...
Oh, somebody asked if you could stop sharing slides for a little bit so we can see everybody.
Oh, sure. Hang on a sec.
Until we get to the, we do have a few closing slides that we need to get to, but yes.
There was another question around leveraging AI to help with measurement. Do you have any thoughts about that, Gabi?
Well, when we were talking before, you had some really good thoughts, so I think you should answer this one.
All right. So if you've never used a tool like, say, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your choice of Gen AI tool is, that can be a really great starting point, particularly if measurement is one of those areas that that you find challenging. And if we have a look at what the research tells us, it is the number one challenge for communication professionals: calculating the return on investment and measuring what matters. And so it can be a really great learning tool. So, I like to think of my ChatGPT as a big brain. Okay. And so if you were to put, and this is not about inputting any company information, it is about asking the tool to give you insight into what you should be focusing on or what you could be focusing on from a measurement perspective. If you're not very experienced in developing smart objectives, for example, and it's something you struggle with, you can prompt the tool, as long as you use good prompts, to say something like, I'm looking at where our company is undergoing a safety campaign, for example. My focus is internal communication. I need to ensure that I am measuring outcomes as it applies to this particular business issue. What are some of the things I should be focused on? And how can I develop 3 clear, smart objectives that are outcome-based, aligned to what I want people to know, what I want people to think and feel, and what I want people to do as a result of my communication, and watch what happens. It is a great starting point. You can tell the tool, I only have these opportunities in my organization. I might have do the occasional survey. I might have this. Can you, I might have the opportunity to sit in on some team meetings or do some focus groups. What are my options from a measurement point of view? What can I do to help me measure effectively in my organization? Again, the stronger your prompt and the more information you can give a tool like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is you use, watch what happens. Like, there's a ton of information it can share with you, and you can use that to teach yourself how to develop strategic objectives, how to focus on outcomes, how to align. Because as Gabi said, you start with your business need. If you've ever entered awards programs like the Gold Quills at IABC, you'll know your anchor is your business need. What's the business issue, and how can my communication make a difference? And so AI is a wonderful tool to help you do that. All right, so we also have, Gabi, 5 more minutes, about 5 or 6 more minutes for some additional questions. We have a couple in the chat. So Sophia asks, for areas like community engagement or media relations, sometimes no news is good news, i.e. a good outcome is that the program isn't a press headline. Is there a way to frame this to impress execs?
That's a good question. I think that I don't think it's the only thing you want to present, but I think amongst your results, you can add that. Sia was mentioning the gold quills. When I have won my gold quills, I often have the real nitty gritty statistics and how I measured it. But then I have the sort of extra little things, maybe a quote from the client or how the CEO said something about the campaign. So you can add that as, one of our goals was to not hear any things about it. And we didn't. So we achieved it. But what we did achieve is blah, blah, blah. So how many people responded to your message in a positive way or whatever it is. So I think you can add it in, but it might not be the only one line. We didn't get any noise, so we were successful.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Terry also asked, hi Terry, been a while. For an internal project like an EVP rollout, what are some outcome-based goals you would be looking to achieve?
Well, that's where you need to do either a focus group or a survey and see how many people think that they understand it, how many people feel like they're using it in their day to day, that kind of thing. You want to ask some really poignant questions in order to see if it's resonating with employees. And also, depending on what the EVPs are, if safety is among them, maybe how many accidents have been reported, and how many less accidents there are, or whatever, or how many people are wearing their helmets in the plants or whatever that is. So you want to gather all that information. So whatever the EVP is trying to prove, that's what you want to measure, right?
Thanks, Gabby. And Anuja has asked, what are your thoughts on the true measure of engagement broadly, and what are some of the variables that could be correlated or linked to comms within our influence or control? I'd like to think of engagement as a function of, think engagement is a function of many things like employee sentiment, engagement surveys, but that's not all comms attributable, but maybe a combo of how many people attend all employee webinars, town halls, in-person events, readership of the intranet, email open rates, moving beyond output to outcomes of important programs like EVPs, etc., and the impact on compliance ethics concerns. Do you have any ideas on how some companies are doing it well?
So it kind of goes to what I was saying earlier, like the medical example I showed. I can say that we helped employees sign up for the new medical plan and we saved this much money. But really, it was the plan design of the medical plan to begin with that would allow the savings. We just helped. So it's not like communications is the be all end all, but you can say that you helped move the needle because of what you're doing. So I think what you're saying is true. Again, some of the examples I showed, there were more than one thing that allowed you to get to that goal, more than one measure. I only wanted to high level show what it is, but there could be, I mean, you don't want to over, just like Neil Hoyne said, don't measure everything and don't overload. You don't want to overload either, but you can have more than one measure to prove your points. And it might be a combination of things. And but you're right. It's communications is only helping the change. It's not the change itself, right? Does
All
that
right.
answer your question, Manuja?
Sorry. Yes, it does. I mean, it's
Oh,
it's just something that perplexes me all the time when you're talking to leaders and you're thinking uh, exactly what you said. You know, I can't bring change. There's a change management element to it. But yes, I can measure. Maybe we were trying to reduce compliance issues. Yes, but overall, then how do you measure engagement? Is it absenteeism? Is it, people taking mental health breaks? It's so many things that could be related to comms helping in building engagement in a company or an organization.
correct, correct. And like I say, some of these things you can't measure right away either because it takes a while for them to take effect. Or when it's kind of the just in time thing. Sometimes what a person needs isn't at that moment when you did the communication campaign. It might be later. So measuring, the person who asked about long term, measuring along the way is also important because it may not be right away that somebody takes advantage of it.
Cool. No, thank you. That was helpful.
Okay, so we're almost out of time, but before we go, I wanted to ask you, if we're, given everything you've said and the questions that we've talked about, if we're serious then about proving the value of our work, what's the key mindset shift communication professionals need to make when it comes to measurement, Gabby?
So I'm going to sound like my broken record again, but you want to weave your goals, objectives, and measures into that communication strategy. And if you say, I don't know how to do a communication strategy, we just gave you the basics right here now. So it's if you do these things, you can prove the value of your communications. You can inform the strategy and tailor your communications. You can understand the effectiveness and areas for improvement. It helps you maybe win some awards, and it helps you to connect the dots to business goals. So these are the things that you can tangibly get when you do this measurement. So think about, do you have a measurement plan? What are your communication goals and how do they tie to the business goals? Um, you know, you can ask your department head, what keeps you up at night? What are the things that you would like some help with? And that really can get to some really good stuff. What output-based measures are available to you? What outcomes-based measures do you need to prove your communication effectiveness? Is there already an all-employee survey, and can you jump on there and add a couple questions, right? Often it's hard to get an all-employee survey just about communications, but maybe you can jump on the all-employee one and ask a couple really poignant questions about what it is you're trying to accomplish. What research exists to help you inform your strategy, such as industry benchmarks, like we mentioned, the State of the Sector survey, or the Edelman Trust Barometer, or things like that. What vendor metrics are there? What key performance indicators are there? All these things can help you with, and I'm having a hard time getting rid of my stupid, is there something is there another bullet, or did I say all of them? I can't see the bottom.
So the last bullet point is what research exists.
Oh, yeah. So what research already exists to, oh, yeah, for, as I said, industry benchmarks, vendor metrics, key performance indicators, survey results from before, survey results that a vendor might have done about your audience for your company. So again, ask questions. Maybe you didn't do a survey, but maybe HR has, or maybe external has a survey that applies to what you're doing. So use all those things to kind of pull it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key too is to focus on results rather than just activity. You know, we tend to give senior leaders and our business partners a report card of activity when they ask for measures instead of a dashboard of results. And it's really important that we focus on results-based measures.
And last but not least, if you could change the slide.
In 2 seconds, Gabby, I just wanted to say that if you wanted some more guidance on measures, Gabby and I both mentioned the IABC Gold Bill Awards program, which we're both very invested in. And there are some phenomenal case studies and work plans available on IABC's website that can help you understand how campaigns, how strategies, how work programs are measured in organizations all around the world. So there's lots of examples there. There are also lots of examples on our website, the CSCE website, and IABC's broader website around measuring what matters. So there's lots of guidance out there. Please also feel free to connect with myself and Gabi on LinkedIn, and we can talk to you offline as well. But you want to talk to us about the state of the sector or the employee communications report now.
Yeah, so the survey is the state of the sector, but the report is the employee communications report. And as Sia said, it's a really good resource. If you want to download it, there's a QR code here that you can use to get the report and have some really good information that you can use as you're doing your strategies to prove that you're not alone, because that often resonates with senior leaders more than just you saying it. Look, this is what the industry is saying.
Absolutely.
So that's the end of our session for tonight. We want to thank you for joining.
Thank you very, very much, Gabi, for sharing your wonderful insights and practical experience with us today. I know this conversation has sparked plenty of new thinking about how we approach measurement. And to everybody who joined us today, thank you for being part of this very important conversation. I hope you're walking away with some ideas you can implement straight away in your organization to help you measure what matters and demonstrate real impact. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, we'll be sharing the recording with you soon, so please keep an eye on your inbox. And if you found today valuable, I'd love for you to join me for our next webinar, which won't be at 3 a.m. at my time, and that is Leading the AI Moment, the Venice Pledge in Action. It's happening on the 14th or 15th of July, depending on where you are in the world. In that session, I'll be joined by some brilliant global leaders, including my wonderful business partner, who was quoted earlier, Adrian Cropley, and US-based CEO and founder of Reputation Lighthouse, Bonnie Caver. And we're going to explore how the Venice Pledge is guiding responsible AI use in our profession and how you can apply its principles in your own work. So I'll send you all the details along with the recording from today's session. And of course, as I said, please feel free to keep the conversation going by connecting with us on LinkedIn. Thank you again for being here, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.